Hello and welcome to part 2 of this two-part series on the Pegasus Astro Ultimate Powerbox. Now in part 1 we did the box opening and had a little look at the hardware side of things, and I don't think you can fail to be impressed. You know, it's ultra compact, ultra lightweight, it's got lots of USB outputs, power ports, even got a built-in motor focus controller. The hardware wise is very good. However, I'm sure you're like me in thinking that the hardware can be as great as you like, it can look wonderful, but if it's not supported by very reliable, very robust software, then it's no good to anyone. I'm sure none of us want to have a whole night's imaging session ruined because of a software hang. So the software is the key thing. Now the nice thing about the Pegasus Astro kit is that the guys at Pegasus Astro are actually amateur astronomers themselves. And the equipment that they manufacture and supply, they use themselves. So if there's a problem, it's not a case of them sticking their head in the sand and pretending it's not there. It will affect them on their own kit in their own remote observatories. So I think that's part of the reason why the kit that comes from Pegasus, whilst it's quite basic, you know, it's not all fancy and glowing red and looking wonderful, it's actually very, very reliable, and that's the thing that most of us want, I'm sure. I would point out that I have no affiliation whatsoever with Pegasus Astro. The two Ultimate Power Boxes that I've purchased both of them, and I received nothing from Pegasus Astro. I do believe in posting very honest and very open reviews on any product, and if that means that it doesn't work, then I will say that it doesn't work. In the case of Pegasus to date, certainly with my original Powerbox, it's just been faultless, so I can't complain whatsoever. They're also very good at doing regular software updates and are very receptive to suggestions for changes in that software. I've suggested several things and they've been implemented because if they make sense, they will put that in the next revision. So, you know, for me, the software side of things is the key thing. So we'll have a look over that now, and I will try to make this as intuitive as possible. There are going to be a couple of areas where I will need to jump from one tab to another tab because the settings for one are under another. That will make sense as we go into it, but I will try to make it as sequential and as seamless as possible. As always with my videos, if I've missed a part out or if you want more information on a specific section, then please leave comments in the box below. If I can't answer that question in the comments, then I'm more than happy to make another video on a particular part. So let's now jump into the software and get going. Okay, so here we are out imaging now tonight. So the first thing I want to show you on the software, we're actually using now the latest version, which is 1.4.7.0, and the biggest introduction on this revision was the ability to have two profiles set up for if you're using the UPB on two different setups. Now it's not multiple profiles as I believe was assumed was going to happen. It's simply two instances that run. So you'll see here I've got two icons, UPB and UPB2. Now what you need to do when you install the new firmware, you copy this icon. So just make a copy and send it to the desktop so you know I have two icons the same. On the second icon, you right click it, you go to Properties, and you add the extension second at the end of the target URL there. Once you've done that, you click OK, and you then have the two instances that you can run. And I'll show you how that works. So basically, if you open up, double click on the first one, you'll see it's your standard screen. But you'll see also here, you have the second instance, which just explains exactly what I've just showed you. Now what you can't do is you can't connect to the two different instances at once. So if I'm connected to this instance, the first instance here, so you see I'm all up and running. If I now open UPB2, you'll see it will come up, and this is now my second instance, second profile there. So it's got all different settings, and you can have different focus settings and so on. But you'll see that I can't connect to it. It won't let me do it. So that's fine. You know, if you've got two different setups, so if you're using, for example, a refractor and a SCT or something, or you have a travel scope that you use which has got a different focuser, that's a good idea that you can just set up your second profile so you don't have to change all your focuser settings and your identification tags and so on. But for the rest of this tutorial, we're actually going to work on just the first profile 1, which is the standard UPB. So you'll see now, I've double clicked, I've opened up. I mean, if I just disconnect for now. So this is your initial screen. Your first button, we'll work our way across the icons on the top. So your first button here is to connect to the device. Now, before you can connect to the device for the very first time, you need to go into your settings menu, and you need to find the COM port that it's found to connect to. Just click on that COM port and then click connect. You can click connect from here, or you can click connect from this button at the top. Either way is fine, but you need to do that first. If you don't do it, it will prompt you to say, do you want me to connect? So you can just do that way. So what we'll do here, click connect, and you'll see now it comes up green at the bottom and gives us our input voltage, input current, current temperature and current humidity. Now the humidity here is showing 99%. I've actually got a different device that's showing lower. I think there's an issue on my humidity sensor where I actually mounted it the wrong way up, and I think it's got humidity directly onto the sensor, so it needs to dry out. So that at the moment is showing 99%. That would ordinarily be showing the correct figure, but I'm using a different thing for the time being. So if we look here, this is what I would call your main control screen. This shows you generally everything that you're going to be using throughout the general operation of the UPB. The first box here shows your input voltage. I discussed in video 1 that this is quite happy to go up to 13.8 volts. I've got an adjustable power supply sitting on 13.4. It will go up to 14 volts, but a standard 13.8 volt bench power supply will run it absolutely fine. Obviously the current consumption, the temperature that it's reading from the temperature sensor, the relative humidity, and the dew point that it calculates from the temperature and humidity. So at the moment you'll see it's pretty much instantaneous. Because the humidity is so high, the dew point is so high, you'll see in this little box here, this is basically a warning box that tells you if you're high voltage and so on. You'll see here it shows up that the humidity is high, so you need to turn on your dew heaters. Total power being drawn at any one time, and in this box here we now have our 4 12 volt, or in this case 13 volt outputs. The outputs are linked to the input, so if you've got a 13.4 volt input, each of the outputs will be 13.4. They're not regulated down to 12 volts. Now you'll see here I've got custom names on 3 of these. Output 4 is just the default. By default they're just named output 1, output 2, output 3 and output 4. And I've changed these. The way that you change these is to go into the settings tab, and then you've got this friendly names tab here, and you just overwrite whatever you want in here. So I've got mount, CCD, focuser, output 4. These are all blank, so their defaults will be in there. If you leave it blank, it will be the default value, but if you write over the top of that, it will change. So you saw mine was output 4. If I just put in spare, for example, then I click save, then I go to control, you'll see output 4 is now spare. I would say name those in a way that you're going to remember it, because you don't want to be switching off the wrong things. The little tab up here is just to reset the USB hub. Now again, you'll remember from video 1, only 1 to 5 switch off and reset. The output 6 on the USB is permanently on and is a powered USB output. It gives 3 volts. So 3 amps, sorry, not 3 volts. So if you want to reset the USB hub and you turn this off and back on again, it will reset the whole hub with the exception of output 6. Now down the bottom here we got your dew heater controllers. In fact, before I do that, I'll show you the lock controls, because the lock controls is quite good. I can switch my spare on, switch my spare off, so these are the outputs. If I lock the controls, you'll see I then can't change it. Now that's quite good. So once you've got all your outputs and everything on that you want, it's actually worth locking that so that you can't accidentally turn things off with just an accidental push of the wrong mouse key. I tend to use that all the time, so once it's all set, then I'll put it on. And in here actually you've got the average current, average amp hours and average watt hours figures. They're quite good, and they're carried forward to the graphs that I'll show you later on, power graphs and environmental graphs. So finally we're now down to the dew controls. Now the dew controls, you can either use a slider to slide them up to whatever figure you want. You can type a figure in there, 0 to 255. I think 255 is the maximum because it's a PWM output. Or what I tend to do is to use, you can either go full on and that will turn both on, or you can just use auto dew. Just click on auto dew, and what it will do then is it will look at these figures up here and it will calculate whether it needs the dew heaters on and how high to turn them on. That's not closed loop, it's an open loop system, so there's no feedback of how hot your dew straps are. So it is a bit hit and miss, but it actually works. I've had no issues with it at all. It works quite well. The one thing to note about the dew heaters is that you can again give them friendly names. So you see at the moment they're not called anything. So again, if you go to settings, look at your dew outputs, you'll see dew A, I'm going to call that OTA, and B I'll call guide. Click save, and then when you go back to that main page, you've got OTA and guide. So set them up and make sure that you've got the right ones in the right order. I tend to just click on auto dew, leave that on. So that's really the main control screen. There's nothing much on there else to look at, so we'll now go on to the next screen. Your outputs here, you've got a global control here, so I can switch them all on or I can switch them all off. I tend to not use that because I do tend to switch on in a certain sequence. I actually go mount CCD focuser, so but it's up to you. You can turn them all on, so I can turn them all on now. Do you want to turn them all on? Yes. And on they all go, and you may be able to hear my camera and filter wheel fire up now in the background. And when you're finished your run for the night, you can actually just power them all off as well. I may as well leave them on now because I'm starting an imaging run tonight anyway, so that's absolutely fine. The little arrow up here, that's an on top of. If you click that, then this screen will stay on top of everything that you do. I don't use that because I minimise the whole thing, but if you click that, then it will just stay on top of every other program. So whatever you open up, it will just be on top of it. You also have a ghost screen. So this one here, you click it and it ghosts out so you can see what's behind. Now that can be quite useful if you do want to see what's going on but actually don't want to lose sight of what you're doing in the background. That can be quite useful to use. The filters we'll come to in a minute. I'll run over that as a separate thing entirely. We've got shutdown timers, so we click on this and you can actually control individual things that you want to switch off. So you may have the end of an imaging run where you actually want to turn off your mount but perhaps leave your CCD on. and turn off your focuser. So you can click on both of those, you can set the shutdown timer and then click start timer, and it will shut down at that point. And that's a good idea if you're doing an all-night imaging run. You know that you're going to finish at a certain time, and you can set things up to switch off rather than just leaving them in standby mode. So that's quite a good thing. The number 2 here, that's for the second focuser. That's for the new software, new firmware, and you have the information, so you can check for updates. Just click on that. Now it's worth noting here that whilst it will tell you that there is an update, or if you're running the latest version, there's no actual update application within this software. It will tell you that there's a new version, and you then have to go to the Pegasus Astro website and download the latest version, and then do a new install. It will overwrite the software. You don't have to uninstall anything, but you do have to download it from the Pegasus Astro website. So we'll run through these tabs now. The filters we'll have a little look at later on, because that's quite a good little feature. So we'll look at that as an individual thing later on. So we now go to the focus tab. Now this is probably going to be the most important thing for those of you that are using the internal focus controller. It's actually quite a good internal focus controller, I found. I do use this on my main observatory setup, and I use this with a lakeside focuser. It's up to you whether you use the focus controller, the actual inbuilt focus controller, or not. It is all fully ASCOM compliant, and much of this stuff here is kind of superfluous in a way, because typically you will use your imaging software to run the autofocus routine. So for example, I use Sequence Generator Pro, and the focus information or the focus controlling is actually done by Sequence Generator Pro, just sending the commands to the Ultimate Powerbox. So all these figures that are in here are actually overridden, if you like, by Sequence Generator Pro. But if you're not using that, if you're using perhaps a DSLR or something of the sorts, then maybe you will use these functions in here. So the first thing that it does is it will pull off its current focus position and populate that in here. Now you have the option to go to a certain figure. I do find the boxes quite hard. It doesn't highlight the text when you click in the box, but you just click anywhere in the box. So I can type in there 2,500, for example, 2,500, and then click go, and you'll see the motor's running, and we go to 2,500. While that's running, you can click stop, and it will stop it during travel. You can also go up or down one step at a time and click go to, and it will go to that. Now the move steps are just preset step sizes to move. So if I go click on plus 50, you'll see it go 50, plus 1000, you see it will go 1000, and so on. Now you can actually change these under the settings tabs, and you can overwrite this information, because these rates, it actually says motor step rates and speed. Well, I've put this forward to Pegasus Astro that actually rate and speed is effectively the same thing, and this should be the motor step presets. So I believe they're going to change that in the next revision, so it's more descriptive of what we're actually describing. This is preset 1, preset 2, 3 and 4 on the page that we were just on. So the default value is already in there. So if we say, for example, rate 1, so if we look at the focus, we'll see rate 1 is 20 steps. So if we'll just change that to 30 to show you what it does. So rate 1, we'll put in there, click in it, 30 steps, and then click save, and then we go back to that page then, and you'll see in there that's overwritten with 30. But what you'll see it does is it changes all the rest to 0, because they're sat in the other fields. I personally don't like this, but it's you know, it is the right way of doing it, because it means that you can't accidentally just change one thing. So if you go to settings, you can go to rate 2, you can say 50, you can go rate 3 100 and rate 4 200. Click save, go back to focus, and you'll see they're all back to where they are. Now what you can also do here is you can set a completely custom figure. For whatever reason, it may be that you're going to a focus point that you were on the night before, so you can set this and you can click and it would move that number of steps. And you can also have a little mini focus panel which just sits in the side if you are using the manual focus for perhaps visual use. And then you've got this little control panel that can sit aside, does exactly the same thing as the main panel. If you find your motor's going backwards, you can obviously reverse the motor. You just click on that and it will reverse the motor or go the other direction. And now the biggest, well, in fact, if I just look at the backlash compensation, it's got built-in backlash compensation. So if you're using a rack and pinion focuser, you're invariably going to have some backlash in. So you can just set a figure in there and it will run out backlash compensation, so it will work. It will always work in one direction. So if you put 20 steps in there, it will go past what you want, 20 steps, and then go back in by that amount of steps. So it just takes out the backlash on the focuser. Now the biggest thing that I've been asked about this is setting this up for limits, closed and open. Whilst there is an outer limit, which is this position limit, there's actually no inner limit at the moment. I've referred to it previously as a virtual limit, and it's a virtual limit by virtue of the fact that it's 0. It says that your focuser is fully closed. Now the way that I've set mine up is the first thing you need to do is physically measure the length of your focus travel, your focuser travel, your draw tube travel, and you'll want to subtract a couple of millimeters from that on the fully open position. You don't want to drive it all the way open, and you don't want to drive it all the way closed, because you could possibly cause some damage to your gears in there. So once you've established how far out your full extended dimension is, you now want to manually, or you can drive it on these units, you know, you can just go in one step at a time, or 50 steps, whatever you're going to do. So you want to drive your focuser all the way closed until you're just short of the fully closed position. I set mine a couple of millimeters. I'm not going to go any closer than that. You can come out more if you're not running that close to fully closed. And then just set 0. Just click set, and then that says to the system that is the 0 position. That's fully closed. What you need to do then is to drive your focuser all the way to your out position. So for example, if I go out a couple of hundred, so I'll go past where I was before, so let's say 2,904. So I'll say that I'm driven all the way out, and my focus position now is 2,904. So I'm going to set that position limit, click it on, and I'm going to set that to 2,904. So let's say that that's the fully out position. You can again close this, you can move it up and down a little step at a time, but we're going to say 2,504. So if I now go in 100 steps, this now, you click on the position limit, and that sets now an actual limit, so the focuser won't drive out past that point. So now I'm on 2,804. So if I now go out 200, you'll see it says move excess limit, because it knows now that my outer limit is set at 2,504, 904, so it won't go past there. I can go out 100, and you'll see it goes back out to that. But if I try to now go out 30, again it won't let me. So there, I believe Pegasus Astro are going to look at fitting limits or having limits on the closed and the open. I believe it should be the case because you can drive it all the way in, especially if you've had a power failure, something like that. And if you're using a remote observatory, as I do, it's very difficult because you can't see the position of your focuser, so you're just relying on everything being in the right place. I like to see an inner limit and an outer limit, but at the moment it only actually works on an outer limit. So I think that just about covers the focuser part. For me, I think the focuser section is probably only going to be used if you're doing visual work or you're not using a software package that controls focus. Because, as I say, all of this actually all gets overwritten by or handed off to Sequence Generator Pro, so that takes control of all the focusing, the autofocusing, the direction, everything. So it's almost superfluous, but it's there anyway if you want to use it. So now what we'll do is we'll have a look at the graphs. They're quite good things. I mean, they're nice to see. You've got the power graphs and the environmental graphs. You can see there we've got the voltage and we've got the current. This here will be when I switched on just a minute ago, so you see the current shoot up. And if you just click your left mouse button and drag, you can zoom in to each section. You can zoom in more to each individual bit and you can read your current off. And if you click this button down here, you'll go back to the previous view. If you do this again, you can slide your slider along the bottom and you can see the graph and see what's going on. And that's the same top and bottom. You can just zoom in, you can have a look, and then just back out to the previous view. And if you double click, it will go back out to the default setting. So these are quite good to see what's going on at any one time. If you want to know the total current that you're drawing, then you can have a look there and you're just over 2 amps. Similarly with the environmental graphs, you can see the temperature and dew point, and you can see the relative humidity. As you know, my relative humidity is showing up on 99%, and also you see the temperature and the dew point is way up high. So again, you can zoom into there and you can have a look where they are. So the temperature only actually goes up to 20 degrees on these graphs for some reason. I'm actually imaging in Spain at the moment, so it's not much use to me of a night time here. It's quite warm here at the minute. All these graphs you can actually export as well. So if you go into the more settings, you can export the charts. So you can just click and export all the charts that are for that particular imaging session. You can just export to a .csv file or a .png file if you just want them as a picture. There's nothing really more on the environmental graphs. I mean, they're quite good. I think if you want to know, keep a history, if you want to keep a history of your power consumption, temperatures and so on, they're quite good to just export the graphs. So we're going to the settings tab now. Obviously we've already looked at the COM port. We needed to do that to communicate first, and we've already looked at the friendly names of the power outputs and the dew heaters. Now down here we got the motor rates that were the set points that we'd already set, and hopefully that's going to change. The motor maximum speed here, you can speed up or slow down the drive motor. The default setting, I mean, they say keep that on default between 200 and 400 for the Pegasus Astro, but even with my Lakeside I found out I haven't had to move that. I don't know why you would move it. Perhaps if you're using an SCT and you want it to run faster because you've got much more travel, then you can up the motor speed on this with this setting here, and then you just change it and then click set and off it will go. Under the More tab, this function here is quite good if you're using a remote observatory. Basically, for each check that you put on for the outputs, when you turn off the UPB and you switch it back on, the ones that are checked will come on automatically when you turn the UPB on. That's quite good if you've got, for example, a mini PC, for example, that you want to boot up that's connected to it. So as soon as you apply power to the UPB, it will automatically switch on whichever output you've got checked on here. So you just check the output, click save, and then on boot up, that will turn those outputs on. The LED indicator, this is very good. You can switch it off or you can keep it on. It's really not very bright at all. So for me, I just keep it on to show me that I've got the power there, but you can just as easily turn it off. And metric and imperial for if our friends from across the water are going to be using it, you may want to look at all your figures in imperial. This is quite a good one here as well, the commands exchange. This shows the status of the communication with the USB hub. Ideally you want to see no failed packets here, but it just gives you an idea of how the USB is behaving between the UPB and the PC. It's worth stressing here as well, this is not a PC, it is just a pass-through. So the USB is just passing in, passing back out through the hub. It doesn't do anything with the power or with the USB. It is just a hub, it's not actually a PC. I've seen on another YouTube channel somebody mentioning these being little mini PCs. Well, they're not, they're far from it, and they really control no data, they just pass it through. You can reboot the controller as well if you're having issues and you just want to reboot everything, then you can just click reboot and it will reboot the whole thing. That includes the USB. You can reboot USB alone or you can reboot the whole controller. And what you can also do is you can auto connect to the UPB on startup. So you just click on this box here. When you power on the UPB, and again this is ideal for if you've got a little mini PC running on it, you will automatically connect to the USB as well. These outputs here are for just the power outputs, but this auto connects to the USB as well. I don't use it because again I tend to start an imaging run manually and then go off and let it do its thing. And then under the About tab is your latest version of firmware that you're running, and also this was actually one of the changes that I requested some time ago, is having a change log, because we really had no idea of what the changes were under each one. So thankfully they've added this change log, which is quite good, so you can see what's been changed in the latest version. Okay, and so finally we'll go back to the filters. Now the filters tab here is for if you're using your UPB for doing flats. It's quite a good idea, I think. So these are default filters, and you can also add some custom ones in if you have different ones in there. So for example, I'll just show you on one filter. If we filter on the luminance, you'll see the focus position. If we were already in focus on our luminance filter, we could click save and it will save the current focus position. So if we look at our focus panel here, we see that's 2904, and then we look at our filter now and we'll see it's 2904 found for the luminance filter. What we can do then also is, if we've got one of the dew heater outputs, for example, connected, let's say that this guide one is actually a flat panel, we can set a luminance for that particular flat panel. So I can say that we'll turn off the auto dew, we'll turn this off, we'll assume that this guide one is your flat panel, so that's at 147. So we'll go dew B, you'll see that that's the one that's dedicated to the flat panel, and we click on save. So what we'll do now, when we look under the luminance filter, we'll see we've got 2904 for the filter position and a flat panel luminance of 147. And what we can do then is we can set that position for our flat panel and our filters, and then take our flats. It's quite a good feature if you've got your flat panel and your filters, you know, you want to know your focus position for each filter. It's not something that I use. I use Sequence Generator Pro, so I use the flats calibration and flats wizard in there. But I suppose it's quite a nice little feature if you don't have that ability and you're just using a flat panel. And then you can just chuck it on the top, run to your filter position for that particular filter, turn on your brightness for that filter, your flat panel brightness, and then start running your flats. Another thing to mention, you'll see here that we're actually all fully connected. Now you'll notice with because the UPB is actually just a pass-through device, I can actually switch it off. I can disconnect, and now I've switched the device off. I don't know if you can hear now, but my camera and everything in the background is still running. It doesn't switch it off. All I've done is I've just disconnected from the device, but everything is still working. So that's quite a good feature. I can also shut down. So I want to exit, yes, it's all gone. Now personally, I think it's a good feature because it means that if I accidentally shut something off, my whole imaging run isn't going to stop. I can then just click on reconnect, and you see everything is still on there. I've had this queried by somebody on SGL saying, oh, I don't think it's a good idea, but I personally do. But it just means that you do have to remember to switch everything off. So once your imaging run is finished, you can use the global off and you can turn everything off, or you can switch everything off before you close down. That's important because otherwise everything will just stay on until you turn the power off to the UPB. If you don't turn the power off, if you sit on a standby supply and it stays on, then everything that's connected to it, unless you've switched it off here, will stay on. I tend to, just as a reminder at the end of my imaging runs in SGP, I have a little reminder that comes up and says switch off UPB. So it then reminds me to make sure that I switch everything off. I think that really is about it in the software. Hopefully I've covered just about everything. I don't think there's anything else to look at on the UPB. I will just show you actually, if I start up Sequence Generator Pro, I'm using a Sesto Senso focuser, so I actually don't use, and I'm not using the controller on the UPB here. But if I just connect to my sequence here, FSQ106, you'll see, for example, in my environmental here, I'll click on that, and then if I go down to environmental data, you'll see it picks up the information from the UPB. But everything else, you see, my focus control is actually done via Sequence Generator Pro, so I completely ignore the UPB. But if you are using the internal UPB focus controller, so you're connected to it and that's running your focusing, the figures that are in the UPB will actually be dragged forward to here, and then that will control the autofocus motor via the RJ12 or RJ45, depending which one you've got output down to your focus motor. But the ASCOM driver will hand off all the information to SGP, and that will be in here. These figures here, the find steps, the call steps, they will overwrite the 4 presets that you've got in the UPB. So you change all this information here and then go in and out accordingly here. That would just get overwritten. Similarly, the go-to on here will take precedence over the go-to that's on the UPB. So hopefully that's everything that you need to know. I mean, you'll see on here, if I actually disconnect from this particular one here and then open up UPB2, so this will be my second profile, I can connect to this now because I'm disconnected from the other one. Oh no, I can't. Yes, I can. But you'll see output 1, 2, 3, 4. It's all defaults. Focus, in fact, it's picked up the same focus, but you can change all the presets here. So this is 2050. Remember, my one was 3050, so you can change all them. But everything is completely different on this one. So you can set up a whole new profile for a second OTA. So I'll disconnect from this one now, shut that down, and then reconnect back to my original one. Hopefully, and there we are. So we're all connected and back on. Hopefully that's been helpful. I don't think there's much else to show. As I've said previously, if you want more information on any particular part, or you want me to go into more detail on one of the specific elements of the UPB, I'm more than happy to do so. Just leave comments in the box below. And I'm sorry this has been a slightly longer video, but it's for a little hub, there's actually quite a lot of stuff on it. So I will see you in the next video. I'm going to enjoy a night's imaging. It's quite clear here tonight, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.